Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Atpadam Darshitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedyadravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So where are we in our text?
We're starting on verse 6.
Verse 6. Can you help us out, please?
Varantu Shastra Niyajantu Devan Kurvantu Karmani Bhajantu Devataha Atmaika Bodhena Vina Vimuktin Siddhyati Brahma Shatantareti. Let erudite scholars quote all the scripture. Let gods be invoked through sacrifices. Let elaborate rituals be performed. Let personal gods be propitiated. Yet, without the experience of one's identity with the self, there shall be no liberation for the individual, not even in the lifetime of 100 Brahmas put together.
So, Hinduism has a huge and elaborate and revered ritualistic tradition. Gods are propitiated, sacrifices are done, personal gods are worshipped, sacred baths are taken, pilgrimages are taken. People stay up all night chanting. All sorts of actions are undergone. Here, Shankara says, that won't do it. Only the direct experience. The self in me is the self in all. Bestows liberation. And we talked about this a little bit in other classes. But what he's going to start driving at is, what is our problem? Our problem is avidya, ignorance. From ignorance, I have a misconception of my identity. I think I'm my body, or I think I'm the body plus the personality. I think I'm a person. And many of us have an idea that what this is all about is fixing this person. I'm a miserable worm and I want to get better. I want to become more peaceful. I want to become more serene, or I want to become more powerful. I want to see the gods. I want to have siddhis. And what Shankara is saying is people can do these things for lifetimes. Or one other piece of this, I can become an erudite scholar. I can memorize all sorts of verses from scripture. I can study Sanskrit. I can read it backwards. None of that liberates us, because the problem is ignorance. The antidote to ignorance is knowledge. And here we don't mean information kind of knowledge. We mean this direct experience of who I am. Now, in the beginning course, did we talk about knives and tomatoes last week? I don't think so. I use this as a classic image because I'm a foodie. So if you get a big ripe beefsteak tomato and you have a dull knife and you want to slice the tomato and you use the dull knife, what happens? Squish. Not effective. So there is a preliminary action that we must undertake called knife sharpening. Here's my tomato. Here's my electric knife sharpener, my dull knife. There's the tomato. Tomato isn't sliced. Tomato still isn't sliced. Why isn't that working? Because knife sharpening is not the means for slicing tomato. But a sharp knife is necessary. So, sacred baths, chanting mantras, chanting all sorts of rituals, puja, pilgrimages, all these things are efficacious for attaining a sattvic mind, a clean, pure, and more importantly, subtle and incisive mind. Then that mind is used to investigate the self. So we need to understand and put ritual in its proper place. But any what we call upasana, ritualistic action, in and of itself won't do the trick. Won't do the trick. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Amrit tattvasya nashasti pitenetyeva hi shrutihi praviti karmano mukter etutvam sputatam yataha. It is clear that liberation cannot be the effect of good works, For Shruti herself declares that there is no hope for immortality by means of wealth.
By means of wealth. Artha, is that the word you use?
Yes.
Yes. So wealth here has an implied meaning. Wealth here means the results of any action. If I go to work and I work 40 hours a week, action, I get a paycheck. Result. If I'm a day trader and I buy and sell stock, I make a little money, action, result. But it can be other things too. If I want to cook a meal, I perform an action, the wealth is the food. If I want to find a relationship, gotta engage in doing what you need to do to find a partner. But what is so obvious is all those worldly things, here just summed up as art, have a beginning and an end. They're fundamentally finite. And if they don't change, we do. So Shruti herself says, so always Shankar will footnote an idea by saying this is what the scriptures say. Because that's the ultimate authority. So the point here is actions won't get me there. What else is there to do, Jim? Be patient. Next verse.
Section 5, Means of Wisdom.
Yes.
Ato mumuktai pratyeta vidyan sanyasta brahmartha sukha sprihasan santam mahantam samupetya deshikam teno padishtartha samahitatma. Therefore, the learned seeker who is striving to gain this freedom within and who has renounced all their desires for pleasure in the sense objects should duly approach a good and generous master and must live attuned to the true significance of the words of the master.
So here he begins to tell us what it is that will help us find freedom. First is an intense spirit of renunciation. Now, this is a subtle thing. We just don't go say, oh, I'm going to give up all my attachments to the world and I'm just going to do nothing. Doesn't mean that. Would that it were that easy. We give up our attachment to the world through insight. So, see if I can give an example. I was talking with this older fellow this past week, and he's been required to go to AA meetings by the court because he got very drunk and got in a fight with his ex-wife and bit her. Now, he's been hanging out in AA meetings for 4 months plus, but he's still drinking. And his mind tells him, you had my problems, you drink too. I just have so much stress. I have so many horrible things going on. I can't help it. I just have to drink. And what he does not realize, problems are the result of drinking, not the other way. So, what does the addict or the alcoholic need to do? What we call in recovery, hit bottom. Fine, we can't live with the drugs and the alcohol. We can't live without them. We're effed. Then we're beaten into reasonableness. We develop some teachability and humility. We're force-fed humble pie, which helps us develop some teachability. We don't give up our attachments to the world out of willpower. Won't work. Oh, I wish I could still go. Blah, 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 blah. You know, we have to see the inherent defect of that way of living in the world. That can take a long time. Take a long time. I'm a diabetic. Someone was saying, oh, we've got these really wonderful crispy cream donuts. Sure looked good. But I have learned I pay a price with my indiscriminate revelry with carbs and sugar. Oh, my blood sugar. No. I understand the inherent defects. I think it through. It's not about the instant gratification. Now follow it along. What's going to happen? And what we learn to see is my indiscriminate revelry with the objects of the senses builds attachment. And that is always heading down the road to suffering. You can't have both. You can't be attached to the world and have serenity. Sargadatta Maharaj says, worldly enjoyment and suffering are the same thing. It's like heads and tails of a coin. Doesn't mean we don't have enjoyment in the world. It's the attachment that's the problem. So the yogi has developed at least the desire to be free from desire. That was the first idea, the spirit of renunciation. Then it was what? Surrender to a teacher?
Yes, good and a generous master.
Yes. So Indians don't have this trouble as much as Westerners do. We have enormous trust issues. Oh, I'm just going to do it myself, the guru within. You know, I'm not surrendering to any other person. And we're afraid they're going to manipulate us. They're afraid they're going to run our lives. It's a misunderstanding. First of all, if you find a teacher who wants to micromanage and run your life, that's not a true teacher. But think, if you wanted to learn nuclear physics, would you say, I'm not going to school, I'm just going to go to the library? Would you?
No.
Wendy is a professional chef. Did you go to school to learn how to cook?
Yes.
I guess there are some cooks who do it on their own,
Mhm. Yeah.
but it sure is a shortcut to go to school.
Or you work for people who teach you,
Yeah.
but you have to learn it from somebody.
Anything in the world, the shortcut is seek expert advice. Find a teacher. Go to school. Why would we think it's different in the spiritual life? So a good and generous teacher is someone who's walked the path before us. Let me show you the shortcuts. And people who won't do that frequently will spend decades wandering around the periphery of the spiritual life. And then the last one, live attuned to the significances of the teacher's words, right? Yeah. So part of what we want to do is endeavor to take instruction. Teacher will give us suggestions. Suggestion is a polite form of command. If you jump out of the airplane, it's suggested you pull the ripcord on your parachute. It's a suggestion. Now, I tell people all the time, it used to irk me that Swamiji would never tell me what to do. And at the end of a camp, I'd say, Swamiji, what do you want me to do? And he'd say, I have no desires. And then I realized he was telling me what to do all the time. Discriminate between the self and the not self. See the self in and through all the world. Renounce my attachment to the things of this world. Meditate on a daily basis. All the things the scriptures tell us over and over again. Oh, duh. Those are the suggestions, the instructions of the teacher. Oh, you should marry so and so. Oh, you should take this job here. Oh, no, you should give money to such and such. Next verse.
उद्धरेदात्मनात्मानं मगनं संसारवारिधौ योगारूढत्वमासाद्य सम्यग् दर्शननिष्ठया. Having attained the state of Yogarudha through continuous and well-established discrimination, one should lift oneself from the ocean of change and the finitude wherein one has come to be drowned.
Yogarudha is a term that Shankara borrows from Gita. Yoga Arudha. Arudha is a riding term. Ashwarudha, mounting the steed. Anybody here ever ride horses? Yes. Okay. So if you find a horse and it's not real well behaved and it really doesn't want you to get on it, so you're holding the horse by the bridle and then you take the reins up by the pommel and you put your left foot in the stirrup and the horse starts to go like this. Have you ever had that happen? Yes?
Mhm.
Yeah, so you're hopping on one leg. So what you sometimes have to do is have someone else stand on the other side of the horse. If a horse is well trained, they stand still. But you're not in control of the horse when you've got one leg in the stirrup and the other one hopping around on the ground. But once you swing the other leg across the back of the horse and you're in the saddle and you've got the horse collected by the reins, then you are in command of this horse. Now, if you want to see real Ashwa Arudha, go on to YouTube and search for dressage or the Spanish riding school, the Lipizzanos are. And you will see these horses dancing, all being cued by just touch of knee and thigh and calf. A little bit of rein, rearing, prancing, going sideways, stuff like that. Just amazing to see what a well-trained horse can do with a skillful rider. So the metaphor here is this great beast is the mind. It's like a Frisian stallion. Huge horse, full of energy and power. You and I must gain control. How do I know when I've attained to Yoga Rudha? When I'm willing for it to be just as it is for the rest of eternity. When I've given up the need for it to be different. When I can just stand back, let life be as it is, and let the mind be as it is. Now, I was talking with Mike before class, and we were talking about feelings and meditation. And I was sharing with him a principle. And this is all part of attaining to Yoga Rudha. Any psychic experience, this is emotional or mental, that is fully experienced, that I'm present to, tends to dissipate. The charge leaves. Any psychic experience that's resisted or denied tends to persist. Now, this can get pretty subtle. For example, I can be in fear or sadness. Guys do this more than women. And it gets covered up by anger. But what the rage is, it's a way to try to get away from the feeling. And we can sleep at it, we can Netflix at it, workaholics work at it, drink at it, drug addict, sex addict, all ways to resist and deny the material and the psyche. What is Yoga Rudha inviting us to do? Just don't do something. Stand there. Sit there. Be present. Be willing to experience whatever's there without the compulsion to resist, run, deny, fix. Any thoughts on this? So, back to the verse again. Having attained to Yoga Rudha, what does he say next?
Through continuous and well-established discrimination.
Yes. How do we do it? By discrimination. When you get more deeply into these levels and layers of discrimination, we can start by just worldly things. Well, I have righteous indignation and I want to tell this person how I feel and they really. Is it your boss? Yes. Probably not a good idea. Frequently, the person that we're angry at and resent is not the person we should be telling about it. Tell a good friend. Write about it in a journal. Turn down reacting. Learn to discriminate. No, that's probably not a good worldly solution. Just at the worldly level. Try not to be a jerk. It goes a long way in life. Later on, discrimination between the real and the unreal helps in our ability to attain to yoga, taking on Sakshi Bhava, the attitude of the witness. I'm not my feelings, I'm not my thoughts, I'm the knower. They're just there. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
For me, a lot of times it's typically a fear of something's going to happen to me. Like if for example, I remember at Vipassana, at some point I had this really uncomfortable sensation near my throat, and I just thought like I had to check to see if I could still swallow, because I felt that I'm not gonna be able to swallow anymore. So how do you think yourself out of this irrational fear?
Well, you just be with it and notice it. Aha, look at this fear. Maybe it wasn't irrational. Maybe you were going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to confront our fear of death, whether you're young or old, whether you're sick or well. I don't know what was going on. Only you can figure that out. But you do it by not resisting it, by being present to it. And sometimes these things will come up out of the unconscious, and no story comes along with it. And the intellect will say, oh, is this some trauma from my childhood? Oh, is this, something that happened in the second grade, or did my father or mother beat me or something like that? And what do you know for sure? You don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just the feeling. It's just the feeling. And yes, some of them are really scary. That's why last week we talked about this idea where he says attained full manhood. better way of putting it into language today is virya, the warrior spirit. It takes enormous courage. Enormous courage to face these things. We don't get to choose what's in there. We spent lifetimes stuffing it in. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
And you can't fail at it. Sometimes we can only tolerate working on a little bit around the edges in a particular meditation retreat. It's not going anywhere. And sometimes it just comes out of the blue. Sometimes you'll just wake up some morning and all of a sudden you're in some mood, and for no reason. Psychic events. And all yoga says is just be present. Just be present. Not going to die. Well, you may die, but you're not going to be destroyed. Any other thoughts or questions? Next verse.
Sanyasya sarvakarmani bhavabandha vimuktaye yatyatam panditair dhirai atmabhyasa upasthitaihi. May the wise and learned man give up all actions which are motivated by desires and start the practice of rediscovering the self, and thereby attain freedom from the bondage of birth and death.
Now, how do we do this? This seems to be contradicting another teaching, which says all actions have as their origin desire. How do I give up all actions prompted by desire and engage in sadhana? Here, what we're talking about with desire prompted activity is this feeling that the ego has. It's not okay. I'm discontent. There's something wrong with the now. And I have the insistence, must do this. I'll make it better. I've got to move from here to there. I've got to change my job. I've got to get a partner. I've got to get rid of a partner. Only I were blonde. If I were taller, if I were thinner. Be happy when, it'll be better if. This is the struggle of ego. Now, what do? Do your duty in the world. If you're in a relationship, it's fine. Be kind. Right? My brother just celebrated 54 years of marriage. Sent a congratulations to him and Sally. He said, yes. A lot of acceptance, a lot of forgiveness. That's good yoga for anybody. And it doesn't mean not to do your duty at your job. Listen carefully. I jokingly tell people the Lord has led me through life by my wallet because I've not been a trust fund kid. In the end, I have to pay the rent. Now, I choose to live simply, but I still have to pay the rent. I've got to generate income in some way. No escape. Even if you become a Swami, guess what you do at one point during the day? Bhiksha, Bhiksha, you do the work of going out and beg. There's no escape. No escaping our engagement, involvement at the level of the body and the world. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If things are supposed to be different, it will happen. No big deal. But instead, focus on sadhana. In the beginning of this work, frequently, my relationships are a mess. I'm freaked out about money. I'm not being acknowledged at work. Have a tragedy. And I think, well, Pilates hasn't worked very well. Maybe meditation will help. So, meditation, the spiritual life, is just another band aid that I put on my ulcerated life. I see spirituality as a means of living more fully and successfully. But at some point, the whole thing turns upside down. And I begin to see that the goal of life is self-realization. A job, house, relationships, family. That's just where I work out the attachments and the aversions. Ram Dass has this marvelous expression for it. He calls it grist for the mill. I love it. Then Guru shows up everywhere. There's an annoying person at the store, that's your Guru. There's your opportunity. Attaining to your Guru. Not getting what you want. Your political candidate loses. That's your Guru. Any thoughts on this? Lesson's always the same. Let go, keep your heart open, then do as you will. Next verse.
Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastu palabdhaye vastu siddhir vicharena na kinchit karma koti bihi. Selfless work and charitable acts help to purify the mind, but they do not, by themselves, contribute to the perception of reality. The discovery of the self is brought about only by discriminative analysis and never by any number of actions.
Yes. So again, he comes back to this point. Selfless works, devotion, ritual actions. They're valuable. What do? They help purify the mind. Knife sharpening. But knowledge of the self is brought about by subtle discrimination with a sharp and pure mind. Pure here doesn't mean I have good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts. It means fewer thoughts. done vicharena, by means of discrimination. Vast majority of the book is going to well, how should I know if I should give up this, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, ritual, going to church, going to temple, chanting Lalita Sahasranam, stuff like that? Trust your intuition. Next verse.
सम्यग्नि विचरातः सिद्धारज्जु तत्व धारणा भ्रांत्योदित महासर्प भयदुःख विनाशिनी. The fear and sorrow created by delusory serpent on the rope can be ended only after fully ascertaining the truth of the rope, which is available for recognition only through steady and balanced thinking.
Yes. So here Shankara introduces one of his most famous images, Raju Sarpa, the snake in the rope. Snakes and ropes, snakes and ropes, snakes and ropes. Lots of snakes and ropes. And the story I like to tell. So there was a Raja, big fat Raja. He was pretty gross. And he used to get loaded all the time. Like drink wine and smoke a little weed. And he lived in Rajasthan, where it's really hot. And so in his palace, everything was open, so there was air circulating. And what he liked to do in the evening is take a bath. So the servants would fill this huge tub with water. The Raja would take off his clothes and then down into the tub. Because he was so fat, water would flow. He would be in the tub, soaking. Musicians in the corner playing. And then when he was finished, he'd stand up and he would get out of the tub. And he was about ready to call for a towel. And he realized he stepped on a snake. Now, in that part of India, the snakes would come inside because it was open porticos. And they would come in because of the moisture. But he stands perfectly still and says, "No one come in here. I'm dead. But you must live." Oh. The servants are looking at the king like, too much wine. So one of them finally says, "Your Majesty, please look down. You have not stepped on a snake. It's just a wet length of rope." I'm afraid. Look. Finally, he looks down. Sure enough, it's a rope. Now, let's examine the image. What we have is what the scriptures call adhyasa. Adhyasa means superimposition. So with superimposition, we have a substratum, and then we superimpose something that's a delusion on top of it. Branti here, he says. So the substratum for the Raja was a rope. He, in his delusion, superimposed a snake. Now, where was the snake? Was it on the ground? Sure.
Yes.
Sure felt like it was on the ground. Was slimy under his foot. Where was the snake?
His mind.
So just because it was an illusion, a delusion, a superimposition, doesn't mean it wasn't powerful. It terrified him. Don't forget that. Illusions and delusions can be powerful, even though they are not real. Now, how did he get rid of the snake? Oh, next to the bath was a large stick. So he got the stick and beat on the snake until it turned into a rope. Is that what happened? He was a mystic. Rope, rope, rope. Is that going to work? Now, this happens to him every night. So then he says to one of the ministers, I'm advancing in rope yoga. Tonight, when I stepped on the rope, the snake head is gone. It was just a snake body. Is that what happened? Now, let's take that image and what Shankar is pointing at, apply it to your and my life. So the truth is, the substratum of my being is Brahman. It's a birthless, changeless, eternal reality. But my problem is adhyasa, the delusion of superimposition. I attribute to the self the qualities of the not self. Meaning, I think I'm a person. I think I'm an individual. Oh, I was such a fool for doing that. How could I have done that? I regret having done that. Any of you done that? I'm going to work really hard on not doing that again. Any of you do that? Mm-hmm. You do? How's that working out for you, beating that snake? I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. Useless waste of speech. That doesn't mean japa is not a value. Krishna calls it the king of yogas, chanting in mantra. But its purpose is back to knife sharpening. I've been studying Vedanta for 30 years now. I'm getting close to realization, I think. I read Mandukya backwards. That's thinking the head of my snake has disappeared. You either are deluded and you think there's a snake, or you know that there's a rope. It just looked like a snake. So you either see who you are, or you don't. You don't, you're going to think you're a person. The issue is adhyasa. Now, how did the king determine that it was a rope and not a snake? What did one of the ministers say?
He told him the correct information.
No, he told him to look.
To look, right.
He told him to. Now, vicharena, by means of investigation, discrimination. The root is vich, which literally means to winnow, to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's what the word comes from. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to investigate. We are going to discriminate. We are going to look squarely at the snake, meaning this thing called me. And we're going to logically discard through direct experience all these habitual superimpositions that we've had for life. This is what this book is about. This is what Shankara is going to give us. All right. Good old snakes and ropes. Any thoughts? Those of you who took the Atma Bodha class, some artists in the Chinmaya mission did a fabulous job. On the cover is a rope that looks like a snake.
Mm-hmm.
I love that image. Whoever did that. All right, next verse. 14.
Arthasya nishchayo drishto vicharena hitokitah na snanena na danena pranayama shatena va. Neither sacred baths, nor any amount of charity, nor even hundreds of pranayamas can give us the knowledge about our own self. But a firm experience of the nature of the self can be gained when we send our thoughts along the rails of argument laid down in the salutary advices of the wise.
So this rails of arguments, the word he's using again is vicharena, by means of the method of discrimination as it's given to us through the scriptures. So again, sacred baths, rituals, pranayama, chanting of mantras, these all help to purify the mind. I'm not telling you not to do them. But that's not going to deliver the goods. It prepares us for self-inquiry. Atma vichara. That's what delivers. Even those of us who are in the path of Raja Yoga. So you've got the yamas and the niyamas, the moral precepts. You've got asana posture. You've got pranayama, the control of the vital energy through the breath. You've got pratyahara, you've got sense withdrawal. Then you've got, this is where Vedanta and Raja Yoga start to merge. You've got dharana, learning to bring the mind to a single point. Then dhyana, meditation. Koha, who am I? That culminates in samadhi. Mind state of no mind, which the reality of my essential nature is crystal clear. Words fall short. All the paths meet there. All right, next verse.
Section 6, the fit student.
Oh, yes.
Adhikarinamaशास्ते फलसिद्धिर्विशेषतः उपायादेशकालाध्या सन्त्यस्मिन् सहकारिणः. Ultimate success in spiritual endeavors depends entirely upon the degree of fundamental qualifications in the seeker. Auxiliary conveniences such as time and place all have a place indeed, but they are essentially secondary.
Yes, so we want to be adhikari, a fit student. Now, this is incredibly important. If we are having difficulty in our sadhana, the suggestion is go back to this section of Vivekachudamani for a tune-up. There are 4 qualifications that we're going to deal with. And maybe we're a little lax in one of them. We just focus on that, put a little more attention into it. In our foolishness, we may think, oh, if only I find the supreme master, the perfect master, he'll zap me and it'll all work. Vibhuti, I want the sacred ash, that'll do it. Holy water from Mother Ganga, that's going to do it. Waiting for Baba Muktananda to hit me with the peacock feather. Superstition. Might get a little juice. In Gita, Krishna says a person raises themselves into the self by themselves. We do the work with God's help. I love what the Christian saint, St. Augustine, says. We pray like it all depends on God. We work like it all depends on us. So this is one of these areas where we need to have what I call the divine schizophrenia. Be able to hold both. Surrender, it's grace. We have to do the work. we have to do. So when your mind says, oh, I'm just not in the right place, maybe if I went to India. Oh, it's just, if only I were single, if only I had a different house with a meditation room. I need, oh, maybe if I had a Sanskrit name. Or I went on this retreat or that retreat. I'm not saying these are not beneficial. But more fruitful, according to Shankar. Check out the qualifications of the fit student. See if you're a little lax. All right, now, next verse.
अतो विचार कर्तव्यो जिज्ञासोरात्म वस्तुनः समासाध्य दया सिंधु गुरु ब्रह्म विदुत्तमम्. Therefore, a true seeker of the self should learn to inquire and meditate after duly approaching a guru who is himself established in the experience of the self and who is an ocean of kindness.
So if you're ready, if this is what you really want, approach a teacher. How do I know if he's established in the self? You don't. But if you don't trust and try, you get nothing. If you trust and try and your teacher is not worthy of your trust, so you're disappointed, then go on. You have to take a risk. Next verse.
मेधावी पुरुषो विद्वान् उहापोह विचक्षणः अधिकार्यात्मविद्यात्मान् उक्तलक्षणलक्षितः. She who has a keen memory with enough knowledge of the world outside and understanding of the world within, who can argue for the scriptures and refute arguments against them, is fit for receiving Atma Vidya.
So does this mean you get on Facebook and have flaming wars with people with other spirituality? Medha can mean wisdom. Here, Swamiji is translated as a keen memory. I could do the entire 15th chapter of Gita for memory. You know what it means? No. You don't mean that. Here, it means, listen very carefully, to remember to apply the teaching at the appropriate moment in life. That is much harder than it seems. What did Jim say last week? Oh, he says we should let go, turn down the volume, have a mind like a sieve, not get attached. When people say or do things, let it all pass through. I remember that. Ah! Why did you say that to me? Oops. I forgot to apply the teaching. Making sense? can't do it after the fact. So this is one of the reasons why the Vedanta is so repetitive. So we get these ideas so deeply in our minds. When a life situation comes, we can't fool ourselves. We can't go unconscious. We endeavor to apply the teaching. Now, Swamiji, in the early days, when he would have the brahmachari training course, he wanted people to come who were college graduates, which is a little older than some other traditions. Why? Here, Shankara says you need to have some knowledge of the world outside and some knowledge of the world inside. You have to have been in the world enough to not have false romantic ideas about what you're giving up. You have to have some experience. We have so many stories. Probably the most famous is Siddhartha. He leaves the palace, he goes around, and what does he see? Poverty, illness, old age, and death. That's the word. In the story of Yoga Vasishta, the enlightenment of Lord Rama, he too leaves the palace and goes into the world and comes back with mature vairagya, spirit of renunciation, because he's got a sense of how little the world is. And here, when Shankara talks about a knowledge of the world inside, we need to have done at least some work on understanding and accepting our own psychological material. It was Socrates who said the self-examined life is not worth living. Now, in our tradition, we have a word called swadhyaya, which usually means our own study of the scriptures. We first time hear it from the teacher, then we go home and review it on our own. That's called our swadhyaya. In the Raja Yoga tradition, swadhyaya has another meaning. It means an examination of my own psychological material. Becoming familiar with my kleshas, they're called, afflictions, my doshas, my defects of character. Where am I selfish? Where do I have control issues? Where do I have addictive relationships with various parts of life? What triggers me to get angry? What makes me fearful? Where am I dishonest? You may have cash register honesty. You may not overtly lie. As Polonius says in Hamlet, and this above all, to thine own self be true. Do we really know what's going on? many of us will have an incredibly selfish motivation, which then we cover up with phony altruism. I'm just pointing out another person's problems to help them see what's motivating them. Well, really, what I want to do is punish them. So we have to have done enough interior work. And again, this takes courage. Now, the spiritual life is always humiliating. Until we begin to grasp humility as a desirable quality. What is it that gets humiliated? Ego. Always. So part of this, I tell people frequently, don't try to be spiritual. If you cannot be Brahman, then endeavor to be authentic. Don't superimpose phony goody-goodiness. Just becomes another burden. All right, we'll end here. Did we get every piece of that verse? I think we did. Read it again for me, please.
He who has a keen memory with enough knowledge of the world outside and the understanding of the world within, who can argue for the scriptures and refute arguments against them, is fit for receiving Atma.
Let me take that last piece. Where does the argument take place? In my own mind. You're out there in the world, and everybody is saying, go for it, get more toys, get more cash and prizes, get fame and fortune, be the best, be better than other people, protect your ego. And inside, no, that's not the kind of life I want to live. That's where the argument takes place. Any thoughts on this? Okay, we'll end here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Now, I forgot to mention this. During the week, go back, review the verses we've covered, read Swamiji's commentary. And all of these verses imply practice. Endeavor to do Shankara suggests. All right, thank you all.